Gulammohammed Sheikh's artistic practice of six decades or more that you see around here is coming to an end today. A multidimensional practice such as Sheikh's opens itself to various curatorial possibilities and critical readings. It's a diverse body of work in terms of pictorial language, visual techniques, formats, and material. Ghulam Sheikh's art has been captivating the imagination of viewers for decades now, and particularly the museum and its audiences that have visited this show. It has been very special, covering a wide arc of his oeuvre marked by both depth and diversity. Sheikh, as the painter, poet, and pedagogue, has been the locus, I would say, or the epicenter of this exhibition. That also highlights, or the exhibition unfolds, highlighting the poetics and politics of his practice. From his early days in Vadwan, in Surendranagar, in Saurashtra, to the city of Baroda, to the Faculty of Fine Arts, to Royal College of Art in London, to innumerable journeys overseas and within India, and you see the boats and trains everywhere in the paintings. Sheikh's painted canvas stretched wide to incorporate and recompose worlds within worlds, opening up spatial zones, pictorial registers, and employing various modes of space making to create these worlds that highlight coexistence, cohabitation, and through art historical referencing, a hybrid aesthetic, bridging and collapsing distance between cultures and multifold cultural realities. This exhibition has been inspired by Sheikh's pictorial oeuvre, defying the notion of a singular time or space. It attempts to bring to the audience the artistic nuances, layered narrations, cultural memory, and the simultaneous existence of temporal realities that reverberate through the spaces of this exhibition. Curatorially, the architecture of the exhibition, as you see, draws its elements and structures from his imagery, emphasizing a multi-perspectival viewing experienced through several doors and thresholds, entries and exits, taking viewers in and out around his traveling motifs, revealing the undercurrents of his concerns and sometimes contradictions and uncertainties of living in a precarious world. I would say that it was a great honor to curate this exhibition. And even today, as I stand here, I feel mixed feelings of the challenge, the exhilaration, and the responsibility of putting this exhibition, especially because Sheikh Sir is also I also happen to be his student, and there are many more sitting here, as I can see. The 130 works on display, there are 130 works on display here, and I think I have reiterated this before, that the exhibition actually has an element of reverberation, where it echoes traveling motifs and his enduring concerns through each space that you would navigate and move around. Except for Ghulam Sheikh's presence, it's unfortunate he could not be here with us today. This is a perfect finale to the show, with eminent critic and curators speaking today, both Geeta Kapur and Gayatri Sinha, who don't need any introduction, actually. But if you have followed this exhibition, and I make it a point whenever we have discussions here, to point out that they both are actually embedded in this exhibition through the screens on which you are in dialogue and in discussion, both of you, actually. So you are present already in this exhibition. I would now like to introduce the speakers. Geeta Kapur is a Delhi-based critic and curator. Her books include Contemporary Indian Artists, 1978, When Was Modernism? Essays on Contemporary Cultural Practice in India, 2000, Speech Acts, 2025, and Critics' Compass, Navigating Practice, forthcoming in 2026. Her curatorial work includes an exhibition co-curated at Royal Academy of Arts, London in 1982, a rehang curated at National Gallery of Modern Art, I think that was, it's memorable even now, in 1994, Dispossession curated at the Johannesburg Biennale in 1995, Bombay, Mumbai, Century City co-curated with Ashish Rajadaksh at Tate Modern, London, 2001. Subterrane, curated at House of World Cultures, Berlin, 2003. Aesthetic Bind, 5 exhibitions curated at Kemol, Mumbai, 2013 to 14. Geeta Kapur was one of the founder editors of Journal of Arts and Ideas, a member on the advisory board of Third Text, and a trustee and advisory editor of Marg. She is a trustee of the Shergill Sundaram Arts Foundation, Delhi, and the series editor of Art Documents, also by Shergill Foundation and Tulika Publications. And most of you sitting here would have heard her speak many, many times, and you would have the memory. In fact, I think I learned of many of these artists who were active in 1960s and 70s from her talks. And her welcome, Geeta Kapur. Gayatri Sinha is a critic, editor, and curator who works in the domains of gender, lens-based art, and cultural politics. She has edited The Archival Gaze and Points of View 2022 KNMA on the history of Indian photography. Voices of Change, 20 Indian Artists Marg 2010. Art and Visual Culture in India, 1857-2007, Marg's publication, which is really like a handy education book, actually, 2009. Indian Art and Overview again, Rupa Books, 2003. Woman Goddess, 1998. Expressions and Evocations, Contemporary Indian Women Artists of India, Marg Publications, 1996. She has written monographs on the artists Krishan Khanna and Himmat Shah. As a curator, she has worked within museums and institutions in India and abroad, including the National Gallery of Modern Art, the National Museum, Japan Foundation, Tokyo, the Grand Curtius and Museum, Onzumborg, Belgium, the Nivak Museum, Minneapolis Institute of Art in the USA, the Photography Forum Frankfurt, among others. Her exhibition Kali, Reverence and Rebellion, at DAG has two Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata, 2024-25, and Banaras 2025, a beautiful exhibition exhibited at DAG Delhi. She has lectured widely on Indian art and its social context. Since 2011, she directly supports knowledge in the arts in institutional and non-institutional spaces through her initiative, Critical Collective. Her website, criticalcollective.in, is the first such art archive and news magazine on Indian art. She is the recipient of a Ford Foundation grant, 1998 to 2001, and is a Tate Research Awardee, 2017. Welcome, Gayatri Sinha. And without taking much time, as we are all here to listen to them, over to Geeta Kapur. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Am I audible in the back? Yeah? I sit here with great pride to be speaking on my very dear friend Gulammohammed Sheikh, my friend from 1966, which makes it a very long time. But I'm also very sad that he's not here because we had planned this together, and he's not well and in Baroda, and it was better that he does not rush here today. He will be, however, listening to the talks as he is recovering in Baroda. I've titled this talk, Gulammohammed Sheikh, Wayfarer. Wayfaring as a nomadic condition, wayfaring across encampments, wayfaring as a mystical adventure, wayfarer in a state of expectancy, as beggar, as explorer, in a trance and in exile. Wayfarer as the one who seeks untrodden paths, following the measure of his feet, slipping, scraping, moving on the ground. But remember, there are also many flying creatures in Gulam's paintings, from the prophet on the winged horse, the Borak, to angels and birds plunging at times with frightful agility. Painting for him is a matter of conjuring the astonishing creatures that populate the earth and the sky. There is odd camaraderie, as also shrill frisson, when feet and wings, roads and branches, hearts and hands entangle and twist in terrestrial space. Gulam knows that a revelatory poetics is good sustenance for his public, even as it is for him as an artist. For all practice and all performance of rites requires a language of possibilities. I will repeat, all performance of rites requires a language of possibilities. And for this, even a skeptic may look to find a poet. And the other way round, an artist may seek a skeptic to instigate his painting. Gulam traverses the entangled roots of diverse imaginaries. He walks the paths devised by him. He also walks the paths demanded of him. These are roots of material fiction and of social realities. For him to walk and to narrate are parallel activities. His narrational skills are prescient, and his corresponding obsession with walking makes him romantically but also ideologically a forsworn witness. So we think of Gulam as a witness and are also therefore as a roving messenger. This walking, narrating impulsion comes from a tradition of peripatetic stints, but as much from communitarian exemplars. He adores the astuteness of a dissident poet like Kabir, and equally the moral audacity of an activist like Gandhi. He brings them together. He brings them together predictably, admiring them for their intrepid positions within an unjust society, but more characteristically, he sees them as political riddles, inhabiting and churning our populace from then to now. But Gulam is not spiritual, nor a moralist. His walking, finding, losing, gaining is of itself an aesthetic. As an aesthetic, it is romantically secular and generates a poetics of subtle dissidence. Neither spirituality nor ideology, but a mapping of terrain tethers him to the ground, to this earth, as an itinerant. And being so, he circumvents mortality. Gulam is not a melancholic in any given sense of the word, but he is acutely conscious of mortality. I'd like to read that again. Gulam is not a melancholic in any given sense of the term, but he's acutely conscious of mortality, even as he denies it. And it is the metaphor and practice of walking that provides him the necessary alibi to dodge the encounter with the specter of death in his itinerary before he is himself mortally done. I showed two works from the 1970s, and this he's talked about very often, returning home with his mother's portrait in the courtyard, and this where he is returning home. And I link this to the last sentence that I speak here. It is the metaphor and practice of walking that provides him the necessary alibi to dodge an encounter with the specter of death in his itinerary before he is himself mortally done. What is significant is that his self-conceived vocation of constant traverse both maps and molds a phenomenologically understood universe. There is no metaphysics here, yet this very embrace, this embodiment can, through aesthetic inversion and a starkly contrarian impulse, produce a metaphysic. To shift register, Gulam is a wonderful raconteur and a poet narrator. He writes prose, poetry, and he writes and speaks an art history as though it were this artist pedagogue's elocutionary, his enunciative right. Who's laughing? Somebody was laughing, so I will repeat this. He writes prose and poetry, and he writes and speaks art history as though it were this artist pedagogue's elocutionary and his enunciative right. His biography as a boy, as an eager lad, and as a dedicated student enters our imagination through his summons. He comes from a working class, just barely middle class, just barely lower middle class Sunni Muslim family from Surendranagar in Saurashtra. His eager encounters with teachers and mentors led to successive mentorships and virtual adoptions. A blessed child, nurtured through collaborative projects in his small town school, he was ready to take on the role of a young artist, poet, writer, and editor while in his early teens. And when he came to the fine arts faculty in Baroda, he stepped into its inspirational environment, both nationalist and cosmopolitan, with uncanny ease. I will keep this painting on the screen. It is one of the paintings, the most beautiful paintings that he's done. It's called Waiting and Wandering. And in a sense, all of that which I may be speaking about is, if you look at it carefully, from inside and edges to inside and back in, with a woman combing her hair, which is Nilima, his wife, and her Japanese counterpart in the left side. But all of the elements of the train, the beautiful vegetation, this large champa tree, and the houses that he has built over many, many paintings are in some senses are made into a universe in this painting. Gulam has articulated this social traverse in his cumulative writing under the title Returning Home. In a public discussion with him in 2018, I asked him to speak as candidly as memory and present vulnerabilities would allow him on the toil of his journey, about his experience of class and religion, suggesting the frames within which this could be considered. A, the political inquiry into class that underlies Marxist or indeed any materialist understanding of social relations. 2, the experience of being a minority, then as a child and now as an adult, as an artist and teacher and public figure of eminence. And he answered candidly from the very start, saying, of course, Ghanchiwar, the area where I grew up and lived for the first 18 years of my life, was a ghetto. Therefrom, he has narrated how, many decades later, the city of Ahmedabad, the city of Gandhi, and in contradistinction, an industrial city of a culturally progressive millionaire family and a properly profiled urban working class, he has been very engaged with the city of Ahmedabad in many ways, and here it is, this city of Gandhi and a city of an urban working class can be charred to become a ghetto. I hope you can see, I think you can see the detail in the work, but what you might not be able to decipher is that orange spot in the middle, which is a burning cycle rickshaw. And below it is a little door with which you could enter. But the entire painting is, of course, as you can see, charred and burnt, with the with a few symbols, few selected symbols referencing Gandhi spread across the painting. It's a very large painting, and it's straight down here in beautifully positioned by Roobina. While it is true that Gulam has in his talks while it is true that Gulam has in his talks through the last some years honed his childhood into a fable to make it an exemplary legend, it is also true that in the mired context of Indian society, this could be in the realm of fiction. On yet another level, when we speak with a poet and artist, the legend and its fictional becoming allows something startling to happen, a subtle transformation from poiesis to praxis, from fragile becoming to realization to practice to action. If he might appear as a young genius right out of a fable, he takes away one's blush by declaring with full elan, sitting right here a few weeks ago, when he declared at the end of his presentation, "Art is hope," with great melody in his voice. He was already teaching art history while he was doing his master's degree in Baroda. He knew the story of art, as it was called in Baroda, in the Baroda Art History Department, by heart. This included both Eastern and Western art from beginning to end, or so it was conjured in full earnestness, as part archival, part historical, part narrative, and part pictorial, figural, and formal material. When he went to study in London in 1963, his encounter with Western art, specifically with pre-Renaissance art, put him in a spell. He said in the last talk that he gave here, or the last dialogue that he had here with Roobina, and I heard it for the first time, he said that if ever he wanted to steal something in this world, he would steal Ambrogio Lorenzetti, one very small painting, or perhaps two very small paintings from the National Museum of Siena. He learned from the Sienese, and indeed they are very small paintings, and they are certainly not the most significant paintings of Ambrogio Lorenzetti, but this is what he wanted to steal. He learned from the Sienese painters, Sassetta, Duccio, Simone Martini, and Ambrogio Lorenzetti, how to build modest townscapes with shallow perspective, the tiled-roofed houses stacked upward from the edge of a courtyard, with streets winding through and some everyday activity, including social demonstrations of good and bad government, or a scene from the Holy Scriptures enacted with grace in the modest setting. This is one of the great paintings of Ambrogio Lorenzetti, before which he must have stood many times, as I too have, but not as many times. In a sense, this is what he considered humanism. And I quote at length here, I quote Gulam at length here, from an interview that I conducted with him, I mentioned it before, in 2018. And he gave me a very long answer, which I have somewhat shortened. He says, if you were to look at the work of Giotto, he says, or look at the work of the Sienese painters, you will see that they are in fact sometimes like blind people with their hands groping the world. They are discovering their world with their fingers. They were still in the process of discovering. So you would keep on going to them again and again, discovering the warmth. You would keep going to them again and again to discovering that warmth, so that in your own world you may also strive towards that. A kind of humanism which is vulnerable. I'm not talking about the humanism of the Renaissance. I'm talking about humanism of the vulnerable soul, end quote. I want to mention that Gulam introduced this Italian dialect. I'm deliberately calling that because it is not high Renaissance that he is so attached to. This Italian dialect to Baroda on his return from England, and Bhupen Khakkar took it somewhere beyond all his friends into a contemporary genre handling innocence, vulnerability, irony, and erotic subversion, unique in India and possibly in the world. A detour here. The Sienese artists are accessible, often naive, as also sublime. They are Gulam's friends. He can borrow and adapt and steal. But if Gulam reveres an artist and pays homage like a disciple, it is Piero della Francesca. He has gone from cities and towns to hilltop sanctuaries and obscure museums in order to stand before a Piero. And he repeats the thrill of the encounter like a child in paradise. Tellingly, he has not tried to steal, not tried to emulate Piero himself. Not tried to emulate Piero della Francesca, who is clearly remote from Gulam and Gulam's abilities and temperament. He loves Piero's figural tableaus, even if they be scenes of pain and disgrace of the holy protagonist, Christ, as they offer reserve, poise, and benevolence, and from which Gulam gains the munificent experience of beholding, simply beholding. Gulam's articulation of a pre-Renaissance Italian art is more almost in the mode of an epiphany. He is, of course, deeply conversant with the Indian miniature painting tradition, all Indian art, but particularly the miniature traditions, and is indeed a scholar in the field. He has loved the Kota paintings, paintings from the Kota territory from the beginning, since he was a student. In fact, he did his MA thesis on it. They're forested landscapes with an animal world caught within the snares of an imperial hunt. He has been captivated by an altogether different heritage of the Hamzanama from Akbar's ateliers. How Gulam revels in this tumultuous, fantastical, gory, and virtuoso series of paintings that are masterful blend of several Indian, Persian, and Central Asian traditions. The jinns, the monsters, the devouring birds, and ribald wrestlers entered the terrain and skies of his own paintings, almost as if with random relish. Hamzanama is part of the epic imagination that is sustained in what is called the Indic civilizations, and it seduces him as if in counterpoint to the rendering of vulnerability as previously described. These two images I bring in here, one of them seen before, for the way that he was able to imbibe from and develop his language from the forested landscapes of Kota, or from all the miniatures for that matter, and also the exuberance that he is able to bring from his relationship to other traditions like the Hamza. There is a shift in his work that needs to be mentioned, though today I shall not elaborate on it. Once he familiarized himself with the digital medium, he started configuring the world as a globe with interwoven roots, a concept that he had developed earlier in other ways, but which now he could manipulate on, through digital means. interwoven roots, rivers and fields, towns and artifacts, and his favored artifacts within that. I'm referring to his science-studied, digitally rendered Mappa Mundi images beheld by his chosen guardian spirits, one or the other of Kabir and Gandhi, St. Francis, Majnu, a dervish, and Mary Magdalene, the choice of which will take us into another spell of decoding his imaginary gang in heaven. To return to the Wayfarer, to return to the title Wayfarer, I quote Ghulam again. Well, I'm interested in the world on which my feet are. You know I'm interested in the earth. And almost everything that I do is related to the sensations that I get through my body. My loci is my body. Cosmos doesn't appear in my vocabulary. But the world appears, something that I touch, something which I gather through my senses. The world enters through my feet, and that it enters my entire body and my entire being. That sensation that I get from the earth, and I would put it in the metaphorical way, that my walking had begun right from the time that I was in Surendranagar. I'll read that again. And I would put it in a metaphorical way, that my walking had begun right from the time that I was in Surendranagar. And I walked to Baroda, and I walked to the world. I walked to Baroda, I walked the world, from place to place. I hitchhiked in Europe for 3 years. I walked all the towns. And as you know, for hitchhiking, you have to stand outside the township and wait for somebody to pick you up. And then they leave you somewhere from where you have to walk miles at times. So I use that as a metaphor. The world of my being, my life, is actually, in a way, articulated through a sense of walking. And I want to show 2 slides here in relation to the metaphor of walking, where he walks in many territories, as I have already mentioned. This is a accordion book, a digital accordion book that asks who's Kashmir, and is full of small iconographical references, hopes, and death. Might one say that in his imagination, he continues to walk across countries and continents all the way to homeland. And then he makes this walk an allegorical journey into and about the homeland. Now here I show a work, Lands Violated, where on top that broken cityscape is Ukraine, and on the ground is the ruin of Palestine. So I want to repeat these few lines. Might one say that in his imagination he continues to walk across countries and continents all the way to a homeland? The word homeland resonates today with the homeland of the Palestinians. And then he makes this walk, an allegorical journey into and about the homeland. The idea of a homeland leads to the difficult question of the nation and identity. In terms of Ghulam's worldview, the question of nation and identity can be placed within 3 differentiated cultural paradigms. Civilizational history, for example, as we might imbibe from, even critically, but crucially, from Kumaraswamy. National histories, as for example, the dialogue between Tagore and Gandhi, and the history and politics of the nation state, as for example, Nehru and his critic Ambedkar. And now in the contemporary the history of a right-wing proto-fascist government and state. But the question of identity also leads us to regard him in a way already figured earlier in the talk. You make yourself, you narrate yourself, you hallucinate and conjure an identity that is a creative coalescence of autobiography and fiction. An agonistic, secular, and cosmopolitan artist, a grounded and by implication a materialist and stubbornly optimistic artist, an optimistic artist. This is a work that he did quite recently and has been shown before and now is here. And he has spoken in a very elaborate way about it, and I don't have the time or intention to describe it. But very quickly, this large boat contains all that he would take, as in the case of Noah, all that he would take if the cosmos, no, if the world or the globe was in a state of disintegration. All that he has loved ever in art and in life, he would put them in a boat and travel into the wide seas where he hopes that there would be survival. Ghulam is a survivor. So to gather the strands laid out above, Ghulam is a perennial pedagogue, poet, and narrator, a wizard of art historical cross-referencing, and a protagonist who enjoined himself to become an artist in the very mode that is favored in Indian aesthetics, of living at an experiential pitch of what is called adbhut, followed by a gentler state of vismaya, which informs his painting, poetry, and plain speech. From this chosen legacy, this is not going forward. Who's here? It's not going forward. Sorry, yeah, it's come. I've returned to this painting because I think it is the title and the content and the structure and the ability to coalesce the world, his world, is extraordinary in this painting. From this chosen legacy, he assumes the task of re-enchanting the secular, a phrase used by the political philosopher Akhil Bilgrami. This is something like a mission, and its context is political life in the contemporary, and for us in India, it is the task of resisting bigotry and contempt bequeathed by religion to a large citizenry in the contemporary in India. Ghulam can envisage traditional art in retroactive light as leading towards the secular. He can be a radical supporter of historical contemporaneity, allowing, even offering, a testimony to civilizational cosmopolitanism, thus recognizing an abstract sense of belonging without prejudice, without exclusivity. Ghulam is a steadfast figure in the art world for over 60 years, and his recitative articulation of worlds within worlds bids him to hold in his hand a universe, a multiverse that is swirling but also at the same time unraveling before our eyes. And I end with this painting, which is an ode to love and which is an epiphany, Aziz and Aziza. Thank you. आपका है, I think. I give this to her, the clicker.
Sorry.
Yeah, can we have the first slide? No, I want the first slide, please. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Roobina. Thank you, KNMA. First of all, for the beauty and the no? Can you hear me? Okay. For the beauty and the magnificence of this show, for anybody who has admired Gulammohammed Sheikh for several years, he continues to dazzle, inform, and really urge the senses to look further and further within his work. My presentation today is very short actually. It's really also in the wake of Ghulam Sahab falling ill and him not being present. Otherwise we would have had a triangulation of sorts of the conversation. So I am stepping in a little bit with a little more commentary than I had originally planned. It's a very last minute presentation in that sense. And I'm also speaking after Geeta. So I will ask for your indulgence in this matter. She ended with epiphany, and I begin with that, the epiphany of a flat world order in Gulammohammed Sheikh. He's an artist who not only enters worlds within worlds, but appoints and then unfolds his own world. It's quite something in that sense. The body of the work is so large that I'm just going to take one or two ideas and present them to you. Now, looking at the work that was presented and our own familiarity with these paintings over the years and now, tells us of the enormous confidence with which Gulammohammed Sheikh enters his painterly enterprise. There isn't another painter in modern India, not even Hussein, who deals with historic cartographies with such authority. Can we consider what then is the ground that he occupies? And by the ground I mean philosophically, because there is a strong philosophic contemplation. There is also the material ground that we have spoken about, the referencing to him as the traveler, the walker, the nomad, and of course the scholar who enters other grounds. Sheikh's ground expands from his homelands of Surendranagar and Baroda in Gujarat to the institutions and museums of England, where he encounters Hamza Nama. And I think one can speak even more about this encounter. There are other resources that England opens. To Europe and Italy, specifically Siena, where he travels to see the murals of the Lorenzettis. And I think he inspired many of us to do the same. I also dragged my family to Siena to look at these grand murals that so appear and reappear in his quotation. Then also to the vast fields of Central Asia, which is really the land of migration. And within India, more specifically, the Punjab hills, and further afield to the east, Varanasi. Now, there seems to be nothing random about these choices. Seen in isolation, they in fact represent a very potent triangulation of the three principal sites of cultural expression and even faith. Sheikh develops his own imagery of the yogi, the Sufi, and the Christian padre. He does this with a degree of sophistication that does not allow for any kind of narrow sectarian reading of his work. So when we view the paintings of, So when we view his paintings of Kabir, and he does an entire series, it does not appear to be in the Julaha community of Banaras. none of the narrow gullies or even the narrower mindset that Kabir himself was to address. Instead, it is against an entire landscape, an entire vista, you might say. There are cities, there are forests, there's an abundance of fecundity and nature. The entire bodily frame of the poet saint seems to encompass, I would say, a vast Central Asian or Asian landscape in his embrace. The translucency of the body allows it to seemingly float in and out. Everything else within the bodily frame is evacuated. It appears as if Kabir's body has been plucked out of the Gangetic belt, out of the city of Varanasi, and then transposed into the great secular churn that takes place between the 8th and the 13th, 14th centuries in the northwest of the subcontinent. What is the import of this geographical location? Can we develop upon this idea? From the 8th century, the Chishti order of the Sufis begin their first wanderings into Sindh, leading to the important line of 200 years later, Gharib Nawaz, Moinuddin Chishti, Nizamuddin Aulia, and Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro, we know, is not only not only addresses the Tughlaq dynasty, but he also writes some of the kissas that are going to be illustrated by artists like Gulammohammed Sheikh and KNMA Sheikh. Implicit in their arrival is the culture of the great centers of present-day Iran, as much as the religious centers of the Middle East, because many of the migrations of the Sufis take place from this part of the world across the waters. These are the figures that Sheikhs covered, and its depictions of the gathering of saints, the spiritual guides and wayfarers that populate his imagination. Rapidly, other orders follow the Chishtiyas. There are the Qadariyas, there are the Madariyas, the Suhrawardis, the Naqshbandis, and this and the entire area of Sindh and Multan becomes so populated that there was a saying that every 10 feet there would be the mazar of a great peer. Then, of course, they begin their journey across the deeper hinterland of India. Many of these, even as they settled in Sindh, maintained vibrant links with the larger Asian countries. And I find this this is somehow something that you read within Sheikh. It is never explicit, but the idea of a vast geographic, literary, cultural, and even a metaphysic expressivity is what that emerges from the work. In this wonderful book, Faces of God, Images of Devotion in Indo-Muslim Painting, 1500 to 1800, Murad Khan Mumtaz, a young Pakistani writer, he points out that there is an astonishing intermingling of identities and practices of the yogi and the Sufi. And please remember, I'm making my observations against the figure of Kabir. This painting by Mir Kalan Khan shows us at least two of the major denominations. Perhaps there is a central figure. There are Hindus, there are Muslims, and there are Kanphatas, which are a sect that comes out of Gorakhnath. And I'll just tell you why I mention him. And these practices of the yogi and the Sufi are so potent that they seem to be threatening the purity of either one or the other. It is suggested that some Sufi sects were considered be-shariati in the sense that they were losing their purity because of their embrace. And the reason, of course, that is suggested is because they were nirgun faiths. There were many faiths which were nirgun. Prominent among them was that of Gorakhnath, the 12th century yogi attributed with spreading Hat Yoga, who consolidated the Nath order, and many Sufi figures found inspiration learning yoga and covering their bodies with holy ash. The text on yoga, Amritakund, attributed to Gorakhnath, was translated as Babar-e-Hayat. We know that this was during the period of Akbar there were these many manuscripts which were translated, but Babar-e-Hayat is one. There were also versions in Arabic and other, and the spread of the idea of yoga among the Sufis was quite extraordinary. I wanted to show you this painting as well. Babar visiting a Hindu ascetic. And Babar will come back in the work of Gulammohammed Sheikh with much greater poignancy. But here we see the emperor seated on the ground speaking to one of the Gorakhnath devotees. Why does Babar go to him? It's only curiosity, it's artistic, cultural curiosity, and perhaps a sense of fellowship. This particular place, Gor Khatri, was famous for one reason. The Naths and the yogis used to come there to have their heads shaven, their beards trimmed. The first time Babar mentions in the Babarnama that the first time he comes to India, he hears about it. He can't go. The second time he makes it a point. And then there are two kinds of versions of this painting which show the emperor engaging with the sect of the yogis. Yogis go to be shaved. The blue-bodied Kanphata yogis, which we can see mainly in the left corner, are quite, they're quite indifferent to the presence of the emperor. But the fact that there is this kind of intermingling of cultures is suggested. We see this somewhat mundane painting defining the encounter between the Mughal emperor, who is driven by his curiosity about the yogi and the practices he had heard about. Murad Khan Mumtaz writes, early Sufis entering India were so impressed by yogic spiritual practices that they appropriated many breathing techniques and meditation postures that are used till this day. So pervasive was this contact that a number of Mughal period paintings are devoted to depicting interfaith meetings. In his own compositions, Sheikh creates a link between a material and a devotional realm. Geeta says he wasn't spiritual at all. The figures that he quotes, however, are entirely identified with devotion in many cases, through a language, however, which is visual but also conceptual. The kissas or romances of the Punjab that Sheikh and of course Nilima Sheikh draw upon also give us the figure of the poet as lover who transforms into a man of God. This figure of Majnu on the top left, who is maddened with love, but then will transform into a man of God. And it is attributed to him that he said, Tum kaho Laila Laila, main kahunga La illa Allah. So this transformation is the figure Mary Magdalene, Saint Francis, the Darwish, and of course Kabir. And the fact that these figures in smaller forms are repeated through the work. You know, he allows himself, Sheikh is allowing himself a sense of a generous reading of not just outside the scope of the terrestrial, but within the realms of the living, within the realms of the human. Majnu is a 7th century Arabic story which has become so thoroughly Indianized as well, and there are many of the versions of this qissa. If we look closely at the map, there are repeated images, for example, Francis feeding the birds. Perhaps we may draw from here another reference to the mythopoetic from the imaging of Sufi saints in Mughal period painting. Now, Peter Maddock, who wrote the Imaginae Mundi of Gulammohammed Sheikh, this is an essay that Sheikh referred to us and asked us to carry, in fact, in Critical Collective, sees a critical shift in the artistic values that Sheikh represents in the Mapai Mundi series of an ecumenical as well as a humanist view. Maddock writes, Sheikh takes us back to when the world was flat, so that we can imagine a future globe in a mythopoetic manner, free of cartographic and economic frames that disavow empathy. In the flatness of the world, there are no borders, there are no limits, there are no definitions of how faith should be constrained or defined. And here we see Sheikh presents a transnational, transhistorical view with figures like Majnu, Francis, Gandhi and Kabir situated on the peripheries like extraterrestrial figures outside all temporal limits. How then do we view Sheikh's position as an interpreter of Indic traditions? The anthropological, the art historical, or as a man engaging with the potential of the hidden repositories within each of these figures. He who places the poet saint at the apex of his painterly readings. How does Sheikh reconcile his generous and highly accommodative views of faith as a living credo with his position as a modernist? This would be certainly one of my questions to you, Geeta. Now, within, around, and everywhere, Gulammohammed Sheikh creates sacred spaces. At the same time, he creates spaces as sites of violation that bear the burning infernos of hatred. Since the 1970s, Sheikh has been one of the most steady commentators on violence in India. This is a work that we've just seen, and it bears a similarity to another very large folding work that he did that was shown in the Lalit Kala Academy. It was enormous, and that showed Fahian entering the spaces of North India, the areas that Fahian had traversed but which are now burning. There are fires across this Google map that Sheikh seems to have appropriated with such relish and used in many of his works. And here, Ahmedabad, the city that Gandhi left behind, charred, as Geeta has quite eloquently said, and the figures who, again, walking on its periphery. Again, in the peaceable image of Kabir, we see the breaking of the Babri Masjid. Here, this Kabir has a kind of the space that he gives Kabir, the fact that he is giving us essentially what is pretty much a line drawing and the evacuation of the body, so to speak. But then beneath it, the historic processes where Babri and the cloud of Hiroshima are placed very close to each other. And in many of the Kabir paintings, the fact that the figure extends from earth to sky gives him a dimension which is truly enters into a phenomenological space, so to speak. The burning of the match in the painting Silsila, which we don't see here, again seems to be playing out with sickening repetition. The violence and the neglect inflicted by the state in the Bhopal gas tragedy, and which he embeds in the very vast mural which he makes in the Bhopal Vidhan Sabha. These are some of the instances of accumulative histories of fear, terror and violence. And Gulammohammed Sheikh, the fact that he aestheticizes the work, the fact that he lends it such beauty, that even as we discuss him, we think of the Lorenzettis, we think of Mughal painting, doesn't take away from the absolute documentation of what modern India has gone through in the last 30, 40 years. What then can be the features of redemption, if not the humanism that he then celebrates with these two figures, Kabir and Francis of Assisi? I'm interested in the fact that in Kabir, he gives us not only the figure at who's weaving, the Julaha. So the craftsperson is also accommodated. There is a wonderful observation by Irfan Habib. We talk about Marxist historians and religion. Irfan Habib makes this very sharp point that there are some of the saints of medieval India who guide actually the entire Bhakti Kal, who are Nirgun. He says that those are of the lowest communities, and Kabir is certainly one of them, and that is what we see in the crafts that are being demonstrated. Whereas the Sagun are, the exalted, like say Meera. And there's a wonderful painting by Gulammohammed Sheikh of Kabir and Meera in dialogue. I haven't shown it over here, but it is one work that you all would be very familiar with. Sheikh's world is a flat world order, without boundaries or borders, the flat earth of the biblical order of the Egyptians, of all the ancient cultures. This is Urbano Monte's huge flat world map of 1857. It's so large that it was put together in 16 pieces of paper. And it is not entirely different from the Mappa Mundi. As we can see, there are corners over here which are illustrative of work. And Sheikh compresses the Mappa Mundi to give us this a wonderful floating cosmological entity of the earth. I think these dates are also very significant. 1587, and just 10 years earlier, the commissioning of the Hamzanama has taken place. That is 1561 to 1577, and there are 1400 folios of this. Now, this is a remarkable period in which Sheikh's imagination stretches from the Mughal. Hamzanama, Amir Hamza is about the 6th century, a figure of the 6th century, who becomes who from a position of atheism becomes a very strong proponent of Islam. And it enjoys, Hamzanama of course enjoys weight and popularity in the Islamic world. But within India, it explodes. Under Akbar's patronage, it becomes an explosively popular set of illustrations, and the entire narrative becomes very well known. Now to posit these within a European view of the world, 1587, and to think of the fact that Akbar, when he is visualized as well in painting with the globe or the sun Jahangir standing on the globe, there is a synergy of sorts which seems to be flowing backward and forward, and which we can see within Sheikh. Sheikh also this world is also, as we know, to be traversed by walking, something that Geeta has spoken of at great length. Sheikh identifies with the daily practice of walking, something that he does himself. And in his painting, acts of traversal have come to have a vast metaphoric implication. In his adaptation of the Kavod, the portable wooden shrine used for storytelling, walking is embedded in the very use of the Kavod, of course. The Kavod has come to have a grand architectonic scale in his adaptation. It represents home and the narrative of entangled histories of the subcontinent. And here the Kavod which he dedicates to Gandhi, the figure of Gandhi who walks unself-consciously across parts of the subcontinent, and his messianism, his messianic personality is embedded very much in the act of walking. So to conclude, for all his idealism in which he places the artist, the intellectual and the thinker at the apex of civilization, I would like to make a small proposition that Ghulam Sheikh attempts and executes another category of art practice. It is a multi-planar view of history. He has spoken at some length about the multiple views, the perspectives within Indian miniature painting, which he also exploits. I would suggest that his view of history in the compression, the collaboration between these different planes of history is what makes his art so exceptional. So my question to Geeta is then, how do we read the flat world of Ghulam Sheikh, where history need not be linear and imagination may subsume reality? Thank you.
I'm not sure, Gayatri, that I can answer this question. It's a very complex question, and correct me if I have not got it correct, in the right sequence. You're asking one question that ran through your presentation, or I read it as a question, is about the question of faith.
Faith and modernity.
Yeah.
That is my question, yes.
That you see it as present simultaneously and in a very generous relationship to each other in Ghulam's work. And I would concede to that. He's a generous man and a generous artist. And he can encompass, as we've seen again and again, that his entire oeuvre is about configuring himself in the world and the world in the universe. And so it is a matter of configuring, finding a, in a more simplistic way, a figure ground relationship between self and the world. Now, I have deliberately, if you can, as you can see in my presentation, brought him out of the aura of faith. I made him into yeah, I've repeatedly made him into someone who walks in but also walks out of the architecture of faiths. And I'm interested in the way he walks out of it. You are interested, I think, in the way he walks into it. And perhaps the two perspectives can simultaneously be accepted. I was interested in this precisely for the reason that my art historical commitment, as it seems yours is, to the multiforms of faith in this subcontinent, if not in the world, that you are endowed with both knowledge and interest and engagement with it, whereas perhaps I am not. One, not in scholarship, but also not in, shall we say, bluntly, ideology. So my interest in it, it doesn't take me into that that concern. Now that is not to say that Gulam is not interested. So I am obviously drawing one set of strands from him, you are drawing another set of strands, and I think Gulam's work, his intellect and his work allows for this coexistence. But I would insist that I do want to draw him out of it. Whereas I think the richness with which you have spoken of, say, the northern terrain from West Asia into India, that northern terrain to which he belongs, I mean, Gujarat would enter that, is true to him, it's true to his imagination. So I would like these to be placed in juxtaposition. It may be both a matter of interest and scholarship and ideology. I mean, it could be read in those terms. Now, the last thing that you asked, which had occurred before also, is something about the planar nature, the plane on which this happens. I just want you to explain the question to me. I've seen that you are talking about the way the mappa mundi, the mapping, the structural coherence is not in perspective, it is a planar one. But can you just tell me what your question is in this?
But the question is about the mythopoiesis that the plane allows. The plane allows. I just want to come back to the earlier observation. I don't think it's ideological either. And neither am I suggesting that Gulam is ideologically informed in his engagement with these areas as much as it is cultural, literary, visual.
Yeah,
but to come back to this, I think let's just to give you again this very small site, and Peter Maddock has written a very, as you know, a very long and informed essay on his use of the mappa mundi. Sheikh takes us back to when so there is the backward forward movement. Sheikh takes us back to when the world was flat so that we can imagine a future globe in a mythopoetic manner. There is compressions of space, histories and time which is being suggested, free of cartographic and economic frames that disavow empathy. How can the flatness of the globe as a suggestible space for even the human imagination to occupy, even if it is not a physical reality, how can that flatness then allow for a greater mythopoiesis? I think it's a very interesting conjuring of the creative spirit within a certain kind of a paradigm.
No, just very particular to this, are you suggesting this as relevant or important for Gulam because of his act and metaphor of walking? Is that one of the reasons?
That would be one. I think for Sheikh, walking is, why does he foreground Gandhi as commentator, witness, historian? with, say, Kabir on the one hand? And why does he insist on the act of walking? Because it seems what Gandhi did when he walked was to presume, embrace, overcome and impress the power of his personality in so many spaces across the subcontinent. And that, and particularly in Gujarat, where he uses the walk as a highly political instrument. So that is one aspect. I think the other thing about this is Sheikh Sheikh identifies slices of history which are of enormous interest to him. They have yielded to him the richness of his many worlds. There is no point in repeating what these histories are. How can he accommodate them if not through flatness? It's an instrument of accommodation, where he can put them all on one plane and say, but look, the Mappa Mundi used to be flat. And it can be, according to Peter Maddock, as a mythopoetic space of the future. So the human imagination, in a certain sense, even on an individual level, is really what I think Sheikh is appealing to. It's an appeal. It's a very...
Well, it's a beautiful point. I must say that when you say accommodating of many futures, then obviously a spherical world does not give you the entirety of the map that you can traverse. So I understand that it is one form of mythopoesis that you are referring to, and it's a very generative one. And the fact that the Mappa Mundi is round in its structure is also a way of seeing it as a figure of thought, a figure of a metaphor of thought that will be assigned a spherical identity in time, and it is indeed assigned to it. So there would be a corresponding poetics of that rounded earth. I think there doesn't have to be any definite solution to it. I understand what you're saying, and it has I don't know if it has more relevance for Gulam than other forms of conceiving the earth, the globe, but it has certainly one very important aspect to his. Yeah.
And look at the temerity of the man, that he stands outside and looks at the vastness of the globe. What an extraordinary artistic imagination. There's one work which you showed of where Gandhi and Kabir are on the edges of the boat. And if we look at it carefully, there's only one half of the boat. The rest of it is the globe. If we could perhaps go back to it, it is, there are the waters, and there is, the rest of it is a sphere. It's an extraordinary... Yeah, certainly. It is I mean, in terms of just the composition, and if we can show that from Geeta's set, मुझे इतना ज़बरदस्त लगता है वो काम.
अदिति, वो आप ढूंढ लोगे ना, कावड़ के अंदर है.
This one. Just look at this one.
By the way, for those who have not noticed or not, it's a digital work. It's not a painting. He's got all kinds of holy figures sitting in the middle.
Yes.
And yeah, why do you say that it is? What did you say that it is?
No, I was talking about the compass, which has been also a very important instrument for navigation.
Yeah.
And also for nomadic life, you know. And somewhere this, in Sheikh's works, that happens often, where I think the compass is somewhere.
Compass is important. It's a very, it's very appropriate, yeah.
But look at it compositionally, that he allows the sphere to emerge or blend or merge actually with the boat.
Yeah.
The great thing about Sufi painting, or the Sufi as a subject in Mughal painting, is that they bring together figures from different centuries. So you will have Nizamuddin Aulia, you will have Mia Mir, you will have Mullah Shah, you may have Moinuddin Chishti sitting in a circle and talking. उनका वार्तालाप हो रहा है, गुफ्तगू हो रही है, discussion of profound things, and they within that they span maybe 4 or 5 centuries. That I think is a clue to understanding how Sheikh treats history. It's all comes together and it can also be taken apart.
Like of course jewels also. Vartalap that Akbar and his Norathan on philosophy, religion, faith, geography.
Correct. Do you want to open it up to the?
Yeah.
We can do that. Any questions?
We can have the light now, I think.
Hello. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for this, for these wonderful presentations. It almost felt like a verbal transcript of these images. You know, it sort of filled a lot of gaps in our understanding of these images. I have a query which I would like to extend to both of you or either of you, and I want to ask you to maybe put some light on this ecosophy in his paintings, in the way he is creating worlds and I mean recalling images or past histories, past natural histories into his work. And also in this series Kahat Kabira, in these many conversations that I had with the images, I now sort of think of it in regards to the idea of the bijak, of how the image appears within the body of Kabir, you know. I mean, in Commandos for Kabir, I saw the image of a working class or labor person in the belly, in the navel of Kabir, and how the chest opens up into like a landscape, an image of the world. Can we position Gulam sir in this current realm of ecologist or, you know, practice which can be placed in this discourse of ecology?
First of all, can we have the light on the audience so that we can see?
Sorry.
And will you speak the name? It's nicer to know who.
I'm Janvi. Thank you.
Can light me? Anyway, never mind.
Okay, please,
you start.
No, please start.
Sorry?
Spotlights are on you guys.
Oh, there are no lights.
Limitation of light. That's why. Please bear with me.
I can step forward.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got the question. I don't know if I have the answer because I don't have a personally developed understanding of the kinds of ecological imaginations that are at work today, both to critique and to anticipate and to then reform through care. I don't have sufficient understanding of that personally, but I like the idea that you bring up, and I'm curious in turn to ask you why you see the fact that so much is radiating from his own body, the message, as it were, the sign, or the possibility is radiating from inside the body of Kabir. Why do you see that as something that we would read in terms of a new ecological consciousness? I mean, I think that you have a point, but I cannot fully grasp that.
I think I am also still putting a lot of thought behind it. I like this aspect of reimagination which occurs in his paintings, and it is very powerful, you know, it's almost like a call, because when the body opens up into this image of the land, I see it as, you know, a point of expansion or opening up, and somehow it resonates with this idea of the ecological sphere and the current crisis. So I was just imagining of how we could juxtapose this kind of a practice, which already has innate in it this aspect of preserving ecology by bringing up images from the past, which I think is a very powerful tool in terms of having this ecological
what I would get
imagination.
from your way you've just spoken is that he is able to both, these are images that contain and expand simultaneously. These are containing figures, and they are also expansive figures. And I think that is part of Gulam's what shall we say? This is probably a question that can go into a social understanding of his person as an artist. This is something that could relate to his beginnings, his material beginnings, and his journeys through the world. I think this social understanding of the world allows him to move between what would be an inner world and an outer world, whether we would see it in ecological terms or we would see it in the terms of wide of generosity and compassion. We could do both. I'm not sure if I've answered.
No, there's a question there.
तुम भी लेना सवाल.
Just a couple of observations, yeah, Geeta. Gayatri, when you started with the first image of Kabir in your presentation, and I was struck by the fact that it's a body that is a permeable body. I mean, it's like a sieve almost. So everything that is behind in brownish kind of monochrome, almost as if it is passing through the body of Kabir. And actually that is in my observation, that actually then Kabir is also Sheikh himself, you know, and he's allowing all these things to actually permeate his body. So all the things in his painting, in that sense, Kabir becomes a kind of alter ego for Sheikh. So this is one observation. And the second one is a funny one. When you're talking about the thing as a flat map, the Mandi, and Geeta talking about walking, actually in the act of walking, if you are walking in anywhere on the road, the world appears flat. It's as simple as that. And
Yeah.
in some senses, there is that simplicity in that observation. But also the fact that when a painting is flat, and therefore when we conceive of the Mapamundi as a flat painted surface, it's the only way that you can easily walk from one end to the other. If it was a sphere, and an actual sphere, it would take, I don't know how many years to actually make that journey. So it's in that sense that all these things cohere in creating how Sheikh actually is imagining, as well as, you know, enjoying that actually as a creator, enjoying that journey which can be done across a map. That's it.
Anita, think of the paintings of Nilima Sheikh, where you're usually climbing up a mountain. There's no flatness. There's only the anticipation, and if you've lived in the hills, you know what it is. What is peculiar about the roads in the hills is you can only see so far. Whenever there is a bend, you never know what will come next. So there is, and you see this in her painting because she grew up in Dalhousie and Kashmir. So there is always this sense of the anticipation of what might lie ahead as compared to the flat world. About Sheikh identifying himself with Kabir, then what would you say to his paintings, which are also quite frequent, say of Francis, Saint Francis?
Actually, in all these figures, there is this kind of a connection, you know. He wants to make the connection. He wants to make the connection with all these figures. With Francis for other things, with his gentleness with animals, with his, you know, for different reasons, he makes these connections with these figures. Not only he connects the one figure with the other, but he also connects himself, even if he doesn't put himself right there, he makes the connections. I mean, that's my reading, actually.
Can I say something in this relationship, in this dialogue? First of all, I think you brought up a point which both I and Gayatri, I think, excluded from our homage to Gulam, is that there is some part of making of an artwork, of the formalist language, which has not been addressed here in the terms that we would address many other artist practices. And the fact that you say flat, it's a formalist choice. We should not only attribute to it a spiritual or metaphysic meaning. It's flat because the surface is flat, the paper or the canvas or the wall is flat, and it's flat because that is one of the formalist choices that world artists through the centuries have made. So I think we should bring in the question of flatness as a formalist proposition. And I think that would be of interest because Gulam is not really interested perspectively. It always moves up, as in miniatures in particular. The other thing that I found interesting is that his identification with Gandhi, I think he would be presumptuous enough to say that his body and Kabir's body is here interposed. He would have no problem. And the other that you mentioned, St. Francis, I think it's as much to do with the kindness to the birds and to the animals as to the fact that St. Francis carries the most amount of stigmata on his body, that he bears that stigmata of Christ's wounds. And I think that factor of that intense compassion of St. Francis, that he would identify, as if Gulam might bear the wounds of the world on his body. I mean, these are presumptuous claims on his behalf, and if he was here, he would give a big laugh and not entertain them, but I think we can extrapolate like this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just quickly add?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, but everybody else.
Because Gayatri, you did mention the term compression when you talked about Mapamundi, and that is very important when you see this painting or these paintings here and then look at Mapamundi. The notion of compression then takes away proximity and distance. It collapses the idea of proximity and distance, which is not the case when you look at Nilima's, fluid spaces in nature and in the. So I think that compression word was extremely important in talking about Mapamundi. The Egyptians saw the world as flat, okay, but Sheikh has taken flatness and roundness, both, okay, the round globe.
That's the point.
Yeah, so how he then plays on this notion of compression to move in a particular way or write his, write his world, literally, create his world. Yeah.
There's someone at the back.
Hi. I just wanted to say about this particular work that Gulam Bhai has spoken about all of the quotations in it, right? That this is Nain Sukh's work, Boat Adrift on a River, in which the Raja Balwant Singh puts everybody into the boat, whatever he wants to save, and then he sets off because he's being sent into exile or he's been defeated or something like this. That is, that's Abanindranath's Gandhi. This is Mangal Chatera's Kabir. There's his friend Bhupen Khakar up there in the corner, inside the water, very tiny, right on, you know, on the sort of top, like 1 o'clock. And there's Surendra Nagar, his hometown. So in a sense, this painting anticipates that big karma over there.
Yeah.
Right? That it, yeah, everything you want to save, everything that's good and beloved in the world, that you want to take with you, put it all in, and you have a world. And I've always read Gandhi and Kabir as providing an axis, which is sort of civilizational, but also as symbols of tradition and modernity, who are kind of balancing this boat of all precious things that he's trying to sort of, you know, bring to safety. And he's been quite explicit about what all is in there and why.
And Ananya might just say that this being an earlier work, he's spare about what he wants to carry. In the karma here, he's got everything that he wants. And as he's grown older, the number of things he wants to carry is a lot. I mean, all the artists that he has loved, all the, yeah, so I think that is a very nice reference that here he's, actually it's a saints congregation with Kabir and Gandhi representing.
It's a sangat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is, yeah. That's just it.
At the back. Aditya.
Hi, Geeta.
Hi.
Hi, Gayatri. Thank you so much for the presentations. And Geeta, this is a question to you. And I've heard you over the years speaking about artists who are also your friends, who you have grown up with. This is also a dilemma that I will face as a curator growing up. How do you write about the artists that you grow up with? And what kind of intuitive and critical tools you have taken into consideration? Because I've heard you, many of your friends you've written about and spoken about over the years. So it's more of some kind of tools that I would like to learn. How do you adopt that? How do you create that intuitive distance at the same time understanding the historical and the conceptual importance of the work?
But Aditya, can I ask you one thing before I try to answer this? You would agree that I would have written on the artist I know very well in very different ways.
Yes, definitely.
And say, for instance, the way I write on Nasreen or the way I write on Bhupen, these are the two artists I've written at length on.
Yeah.
The way I write on Hussain, which is also something I've written at great length. It will depend partly on the actual proximity and distance I have with the artist, but it will also depend on the mode of address that I want to adopt for a particular occasion or a particular context. So I would have normally not written on Nasreen in a personal way. I had great trepidation in making it personal, bringing in her neurological illness as part of it. There's also often, art historically, an objection to it. I would imagine that Griselda Pollock would not like that I should bring in her neurological condition into her, her drawing. I took that particular decision very carefully, and I felt that I would be camouflaging both her fragility as well as her enormous investment in getting that line straight. She used to reject many drawings because she didn't get it straight. She didn't get the angle that she wanted. And I think that striving was the reason, not only because she was a very dear friend, but because that particular insight into Nasreen required that. For instance, when I write on Sheila Gowda, I write completely objectively. I don't have reason to bring in both any biography or any personal or a sense of self. I don't bring it. So I think it would differ, partly of course that Nasreen is my contemporary and Sheila is not. That could be one reason. But I think it would depend from artist to artist. I write on Hussein quite objectively. I go through his various phases. I make formalist analysis, and I link up his interest, his ambition to be an artist for and of India, and all of that is sort of I write on Hussein ideologically, whereas I write on Bhupen in a very different way. I want to enter that strange universe that he inhabited, which appears in his paintings in the most provocative way. That's a very poor word for it. I can't think of another one. So I think it would differ, and I think if you were to write now, you would adopt different. I don't even say they are strategies. They are impulsions of the artist and the occasion for which it is written. And if I write like this on Ghulam today, it's to do with the fact that I have not written about him like this before. This little paper that I presented today is written from a definite hand of friendship and a desire to understand what this friend has been about. So I think it would differ very much.
Yeah, which is also my question is coming from, because I remember them being radically different in every approach.
Sorry?
At least that is where my question is also coming from, because I remember them being radically different in terms of your approach and analysis of going in and out of the practice and also the politics around it. So that's where actually I wanted to hear more about how you would have approached it. Thank you so much.
And I might just add one very personal note here. I've written about Vivan's history project, which is completely and totally ideological and historical stroke ideological, and stroke in a smaller type formalist. And it goes into history, but it goes a lot into art history, and it goes into the first instance of attempting a historical project of that scale. But I'm writing now on him, on the last work that he did, and which was shown at Sharjah, and he did not see it, and it's to be shown in Bombay, and I will write it completely differently. So I think we should allow ourselves. I don't know if this is art historically valid. Frankly, I don't know if art historians take different positions. Whether one can legitimately change tone, I don't know, but I have done that.
I have a question. If we consider contemporary Indian artists, you may not want to go back to your early book, which we all read, like a Bible of the 1970s. When we publish single essays on artists in one publication, there is different sort of evaluative tendency that the reader may bring, and history may bring, and you may bring when you look at it in posterity. Now you have mentioned earlier when your book was released, Speech Acts, that you're now also working on another set of artists. And what are the readings for you yourself when you look back at that early book, and how do you stand by, does a writer like yourself stand by everything that she wrote at that time? What are the denials? What are the squirmy bits, if you like, if there are any, or what is the validation? Like, for instance, you stay with Bhupen and you stay with Hussein.
Yeah.
You don't stay with some of the others.
Yeah,
are there also regrets of exclusion?
Yeah, I think that the artist expressed not only regret but anger, that why was so and so not, why was I not in it, or why was so and so not in it. That choice we always make, Gayatri. You must make, when you put together a book, you make a book which is coherent to you at that moment.
Yes, that's right.
So that is not something that can have some a priori logic.
But for you, looking back at your own
I have
choices.
not read that book at all. And I have read only, I think, Sousa again. I don't think, so I don't stand by that book in some valiant way.
Aditya, you have your answer. You can always renounce your book.
Probably it was adequate for that time, but it was a simple book.
That's fine. We all understood it. हम सबको समझ में आ गया. We cut our teeth on
But अब
one
गुलाम
Indian
के
eye.
वापस आते हैं. Any questions?
Anybody has questions? I have one small question, and coming from friendship now, talk a bit about love. The figure of Majnu in the forest perhaps is arguably so one of my favorite works in this particular exhibition, apart from a few more, and that work just baffles me in terms of when we talk about Sufi love, and so ishq-e hakiki, ishq-e majazi. So Kabir, Mira, and other Sufi poets, whoever mentioned that, they talk about, you know, kind of transcendental love. But Majnu, then, you know, I can't help but think of Laila, or Kes, the figure of Kes, I can't help but think of Laila. So, and that also brings me to how, you know, artists as a couple, you know, are in love, they you know, kind of grow together. So I just wanted to ask, my question was towards how do you look at that obscure, almost obscure figure of Majnu in the whole, in this particular spread, where Sufi or Bhakti, you know, kind of intent of this curatorial exercise is very strong, but where does Majnu stand? Because that is very physical love, and Laila cannot be just transcendental. It's a physical, the physicality of it is strong, and I would like to stand by that. It's just a thought and a question. How does that?
Okay.
It's a very nice
Just trying to understand your question. You're saying, where does Laila stand in this moment in the painting, or where does Laila stand in the kissa?
That kind of trajectory of Majnu as a Sufi is.
So the question is Majnu redeemed from tragedy? Is he redeemed from tragedy by becoming a man of God? Where he says, I have to get this right. If I get it wrong, that won't be good. You can say Laila, Laila, I will say La ilaha illallah.
Yes.
So this is, and look at the movement of the Qissa, that it comes out of Saudi Arabia in the 7th century, and there are interpreters in Iran, in the entire sort of Islamic belt, and then it percolates into what Punjabis think is now their Qissa.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody thinks Laila, Majnu, Heer, Ranjha. These are all Muslim stories. Ranjha comes from a Muslim background, as you know, as do Soni Mahiwal, as do Laila Majnu. Their absorption speaks about the success of the intermingling of faiths in a certain sense. But Majnu, I think, is important because he's redeemed. There is a redemption, there is a possibility by turning into a man of God.
But curatorially, they are so closely placed when Niluma and Gulam Bhai are placed, and then you see Majnu in the forest in another. I can't help but read it as, you know, kind of a sharing, almost Sufi in, you know, kind of love.
I'm not
but
sure
yeah,
what that
maybe I'm
reference is to.
romanticizing it too much.
Anyway,
yeah.
Tapati.
No, just to return to Ghulam Sheikh's paintings, one of the things that I wanted both of you to reflect on is the density of citation in his work, right? So it is almost as if, and this is a journey, because from, say, a painting like Returning Home After a Long Absence, which just has his mother and that imagined village home, to, say, the Arc paintings, the Mapamundi paintings, it seems that you have to bring a huge body of both historical, of the, you know, and art historical knowledge into it, both of the early modern world of the Mughals and of, you know, early Renaissance Europe, but equally of, say, the series of citations that, for instance, in a painting like this, where you know that the figure of Gandhi is coming out of an Abanindranath painting, Kabir out of something. So I'm just asking in terms of, because I had the immense pleasure when the Arc painting was shown at the Bikaner house of him actually taking us through each and every one of the sides, which would have been almost impossible to otherwise grasp. You know, what exactly he's putting in terms of pairs, etc. So I'm beginning to think of, therefore, his address and his imagined audience for each of these, for his later works. He's not here today, but if both of you who've looked at it so closely, because I think more than any other contemporary artist, he is requiring of the viewer that depth of art historical knowledge to bring to the work. And that is a burden, therefore, on the viewer. He is putting it out there. You can appreciate the work for what they are, but there's a continuous, so the sense of the flatness is nonetheless about so much simultaneity, so that your vision is about so much happening. But it is also about what you need to bring. So that kind of knowledge that you would need to bring to a work, to be able to stand before him like he does and see it all there. So I just wanted to know more about that. It seems that that demand is huge, right? And so how many, what is the initiated group that would be able to really take it all in?
Should I start?
Yeah.
I don't know about initiated group, Tapati, but
different kinds of initiated groups.
We didn't talk about his literary, the depth and the wealth of literary references, engagements, both pedagogically as well as his interest in Gujarati literature, his familiarity with the poets of his time, Suresh Joshi, Arun Kulhatkar, etc. We didn't even talk about, when he pushes his imagination back, the figure that, as you ask this question, that comes to mind immediately is Abd al-Rahim Khane Khanan, the big sort of interpreter of the number of texts that passed through Khane Khanan's hands to enrich Akbar's library. The Hamza Nama passes through him. So do so many of the other kinds of texts, which are from the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the many texts there are hundreds of them and they are available on the net. I think Sheikh, if he had to have a sort of a literary aspiration which would go back in time, it would be something like this, to be able to read the texts in their original and to bring in the elements from the visual that are suggested either through the paintings in the folios or because it has appealed to him in some way. But over and above all this, I think there is a strong artistic intentionality to persuade. There is a persuasiveness in Ghulam Sheikh, which is, let's compare this with Bhupen Khakkar. I don't think Khakkar cares very much to persuade. Ghulam Sheikh seeks to, in that big arc that he's taking, the choice of intellectuals. Frida Kahlo, we never see the influence of Frida Kahlo. Perhaps Geeta does and she would be better off telling you about it. I don't see it immediately. But the fact that these are very carefully, precisely chosen figures that he is going to take. And then there are also the normal people, the subalterns. And he has an interesting way of depicting the subalterns, either in linear form or in close, crowded bunches. They're not always identified. But in this relationship, the arc, the movement of the sea, the great worthies, Frida Kahlo, Einstein, etc., and then all the other little fellows, there is persuasion. I'm convinced that there is, the word may not be moral, but even humanist sounds like not the right word, but there is in Sheikh this thing. And that's why I think citation, textually, poetically, and of course pictorially is so important to him, or at least he has that kind of appetite. huge appetite to accommodate all of these things.
Could you use the word pedagogue?
What? Pedagogue? Yeah, he is, of course, Sonia. He is. That would be the trigger. And
I think that's very true.
yeah, that's true.
Can I just add that we haven't thought of Ghulam as a public intellectual, and what Tapti is indicating, that he has the desire and he challenges the viewer, because he's a public intellectual, so this is something that we would think about in terms of this one.
Right. Geeta, you would like to answer this?
I don't know if I have. Sorry, Anita. No, I think the question is what Tapati has put forth is not necessarily a question, but an observation of the nature of Ghulam's erudition, but his desire for sharing. That it is not just that he's. That is the pedagogic aspect, I think. That his erudition, and he doesn't, I think, even use the word erudition. It is his desire for knowing, and knowing as much as he possibly can within art history, but also cultural and historical context. What would he want us to do with it is, I think he would leave it, and if you asked him this question, he would say this is a matter of choice for the viewer. I don't think he would be a disciplinarian in that respect as a pedagogue. He would say you select and you reconfigure as you wish. I wanted to just add something which is completely, like, I took it off from what Tapati was saying, that this actually establishes the fact that Ghulam is not a modernist. The modernist subtracted, constantly subtracted through the 20th century referentiality. They would have a referentiality, but it would be formally always repositioned. So I'm interested that your observation makes me understand what Ghulam's relationship is with modernist art. He's deeply engaged, he's deeply impressed by it, in the sense it has impressed itself on his imagination, but he's clearly taking a position which is not the primary modernist position of the 20th century. He is denying that primacy of a single statement with a coherent form. And that is an interesting thing. I had never thought of that, but it is, I mean, that is on the formalist side. But in terms of pedagogy and expectation, I think Ghulam would be very democratic. That you make a democratic choice of what you are engaged with. I don't think he's asking us to necessarily, frankly, I have to tell you, I'm not interested in all the number of artists he'd put in that karma. I mean, I thought, yeah, so he's interested in so-and-so. I looked at a few, but I mean, I wasn't going to make an iteration, you know, a copybook list of it, because it was his desire to put them in. It doesn't have to be my responsibility to hold them in my head. So I think he's quite, he does what he needs to do in his own imaginary, but he would allow for a more sweeping relationship. I think that would be true, but he has to say it himself.
Actually, he did say last time.
What?
When he had his conversation with Roobina, he described how he went to England and he learned a lot, but that didn't speak to him. Then he went over to the V&A and he saw the Indian miniatures. And he walked for 3 years and he said, I made it on my own. I took everything on. I saw everything I wanted to see with my own eyes. And I brought it all with me. I took it all along.
Sorry, say that.
Can we have the mic, please, for him?
Here you go.
Please, can you start again? Thank you.
Sorry. I think when Robert Skelton, who was a hugely influential figure for many of us who worked in England and would visit the V&A, his sheer erudition, his library, his knowledge was really quite spectacular. So I remember Ghulam Sheikh writing about him and how he really discovered Mughal miniature painting in the holdings of the V&A at that time while he was at the Royal College.
Yeah, we carried this. Yes.
Yeah, and the way he said that his, his deep dive into India's own art historical past, especially into the wealth of Mughal miniature painting that the V&A holds, really begins there. So I think it was that kind of, so in a way it's like a Renaissance imagination that is really at work. So I think he talks about that deep first time, and it would be, I forget, it would be in the 50s that he's, no, 60s. 60s that he's there,
66.
yeah. So I think after John Irvin Skelton had taken, or was about to take over the Indian section, or maybe he was working under John Irvin then. So, but I remember that very deep, beautiful description that he gave of Skelton and the way Skelton introduced him to that, to miniature paintings in that collection.
Yeah, he was a very close friend of, and he was only a student at that time in Royal College of Art. Ghulam was only a student, and he had access to Skelton's. Yeah, you have to close.
No, I'm just about to say that what an exceptional evening and such extraordinary presentations, such questions and such depth. Really, thank you so much, both Geeta and Gayatri, for this fantastic presentation on Gulammohammed Sheikh. Yeah, you made us walk, like the act of walking, and where we couldn't walk, we actually flew across the skies.
Yeah.
And into even realms of mythology and other such realms. Thank you so much. There is another event after this, because today is the last day of this exhibition, and so we have to end this conversation here. Thank you very much for being such a terrific audience and with all the questions that you really brought forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.